welcome to the Improv Summit. As always, I'm your host, Spencer. With me today, I have a very special guest. And I always say I have a special guest, so what I've done is I've done the old improv game of taking the first letter of that person's first name and putting an adjective in front of it that starts with that same letter. And today, I have with me Tubular Tim. How's it going?
Tubular Tim. Tubular, sorry, the 80s called. They wanted their word back.
Well, the other one was going to be totally, so...
Totally. I'll take it. I'll take whatever I can get. I'll take it. Tubular Tim, I love it. Oh, man, how are you doing? How are you doing, Spencer?
I'm good. I'm good. You know, all things considered, couldn't ask for a better life. That sounds really... I promise
and then he walks
I'm okay.
off. Then you walk off into the sunsets. Just we see you on a horizon and couldn't have asked for a better life. Well, that's it from me.
It's a wonderful life. See, it's a wonderful life. I promise if you're watching or listening to this, I am totally okay. Thank you for your concern. I'm good. just want to clarify. But if you want to hit me up in if you want to hit me up in the DMs or text me, I'm also fine with that too. I may just not get back to you for a couple days because I'm busy. Also follow me on TikTok. Just kidding. Anyway. Let's dive in and talk about you, Tim, and your improv experience. What is your background in improv?
Yes. So I took my very first improv class back in 2011 at the world famous Second City in Chicago, Illinois. I was not living in Chicago at this time. I was living in La Crosse, Wisconsin with my family. So this was in the summer. And we came down a little trip to Chicago as a family. And I started taking a few immersion classes at Second City, loved it, and that sort of sparked my journey into improv. And then in 2013, post-college, I just went straight into it. So I lived in Milwaukee, and I studied at Comedy Sports Milwaukee, and I also took classes at IO Chicago when they were at their old location in Wrigleyville. I took classes at Second City in Chicago as well. And so I went very hard into I want to do sketch, I want to do satire, I want to be part of this culture and this community. Essentially it was that 2011 was the first foray, began doing college improv, helped start the college group that I believe is still going at my university, for Turbo University, this tiny little college. But then right in 2013, went very hard into, I'm pursuing this. And so what I've done over my time is since 2013, I've become a professional comedian. I've toured around the world on cruise contracts with the Second City, traveling on the Norwegian cruise lines. I've been part of original reviews there. I'm currently part of their national touring company. And wherever you're listening to, it's possible that we're coming to you. So make sure that you look up the Second City and your hometown or wherever you live, because it's very possible in the future I'll be stopping by and doing sketch and improvisation and probably some original material as well. Let's see, in addition to all that, I've been part of most comedy theater house teams and house groups. I was part of IO Chicago's multiple Herald teams there. If you're not familiar with Herald teams, that is effectively a house team.
They exist all over.
They are, oof, boy. But I did multiple Herald teams at the IO Chicago location. And, since the pandemic, goodness, I feel like I've transformed as a human being into mostly the written medium now. So for me, I think currently now I'm transitioning almost not away from improv, but into what improv means outside. I got a job. I have a job as a fantasy football analyst for a company in Las Vegas called Fantasy Pros. And I got that job because I said, I'm a comedian and I'm also pretty good with statistics. So improvisation is opened doors in other avenues of life. Anyway, most recently.
Side note, it's funny you say fantasy football. I played fantasy football for the first time this year. I have no idea how to play. I just picked players, and I ended up 7 out of 16, so I did okay.
Why you played in a 16-team league?
I
Oh
think that's
my
how many.
God.
Maybe it was 14. Maybe it was
Wow.
14. I don't know. But
That's
I finished
still,
like right in the
still.
middle, and so like at first week out, I literally the commissioner. I literally was talking to him, and, and I was like, the only thing I know about fantasy football is the television show The League, which I love. And
I mean,
I was like, I feel
yeah.
like I'm a taco because I just pick players and like just let it ride. And the very first week, I literally messaged him. I said, "Hey, when's the draft?" He was like, "It was last week," and I was like, "Oh, I missed it." Okay, so I just had like this auto draft, and then the very first week, he messaged me, and he goes, "I can't believe I got beat by Taco." I was like, "What? Did I win?" I had no idea what was going on. I won my
My
first week
God.
of fantasy football against the commissioner, and I had no idea what was happening. I missed the draft. But I ended up like seventh place. Not bad. Not
Hey,
bad.
that's really impressive.
I'll take
That's
it. I just went through
yeah.
and I looked at the stats and it was like plus 18. I was like, oh, let me pick that quarterback instead of the -6. I was like, I just went with the numbers. I didn't care who it was.
You know the crazy thing is you just inadvertently did it exactly right. Like,
I
yeah, you
because
gotta
the
follow
thing
the
was
numbers, baby.
I have no like like relationship to any like teams or players. I mean, I do, but like my college team, I don't have any pro teams, but like my college team sucks, so I wouldn't put any of them on when they've gone pro. They are there, and I was like, nope, no thanks, Jameis Winston, you're not gonna be on my team. Sorry. Uh, although
No,
I did go to Florida State the year we were national champions, and then the very next year
hey,
when we sucked. So
we all have those moments in life where we're like, hey, you know what's awesome? Never mind, it's not awesome. Forget about it.
yeah.
I was proud of something. I realized I shouldn't have been.
But it's interesting. I think it's so interesting that you bring up fantasy football as a way to use improv because every time
Yeah.
I went to go like set my lineup or like change players, I literally just went. It was like an improvised moment of me going like, well, I was like, oh, I gotta check my lineup. I think so. Let me get on there, and I would just go, I don't have a quarterback. I probably should add one. Or like it would have me trade like a flex for a running back, and I was like, now I have two running backs. How did that happen? Okay, I guess I can do that. And then I was like, maybe I should have a flex though, and I was like, oh geez. And then it was like, and then I was like, okay, I want to take out this. I want to take out this running back, and it's like, do you want to put in another quarterback? And I'm like, I probably should have a running back. But also improv I guess the whole idea is that improv is a team sport. And so there's a lot of metaphors that I've learned. It's weird because I don't watch a lot of sports or like play. I definitely don't play sports, but I have learned improv. I can really understand it through sports metaphors, and it's very weird because like
Yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
remember people like we had like a baseball analogy on this show, excuse me, and we also had like I remember in 5B of IO, the last level I had to take, I had my teacher Holly Laurent, love her to death. She's great, amazing. And she
Oh
said
yeah.
this analogy where she said, because I was always hesitant about going out. One thing is I was always analyzing in the back line. I was like, okay, I could call this character back. I could do this. And I just forgot to go out. But two, I just was like, I'm worried about what I'm going to say and what I'm going to do and how I'm going to like make it funny.
Yeah.
And so my teammates would just pull me out. But what I would say, what she said is she said, think of the back line as being on the court and think of the scene as being on the bench. Where when you're on the bench, you have a chance to breathe. And so you get a chance to breathe and play in the scene. And I was like, wait, I've been doing all the work this whole time. And then people have argued the
Oh,
opposite.
that's
But
pretty interesting.
in a way, it made sense to me because I was like, oh, there's less pressure when I'm actually in the scene. I may be carrying the weight of what's going on in that moment, but I don't have to worry about editing or figuring out where to go next. I can literally just live in that moment. So it is like I get a little bit of a break, a little bit of a breather to just play. And I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
makes it made such sense to me. And so it's just, let's talk about fantasy football and improv. I feel like this is an interesting
Well,
topic.
well, I like that you brought up Holly Laurent because there's I've known a number of people who have sort of passed along the wisdom of Holly, and you know, I feel like a lot of teachers and improvisers are that way, where you're like, oh, that person really knew their stuff.
Mhm.
And the crazy thing is, like, they probably got it from someone else, and we don't really know some of the origins of some of these things. But I remember one of the lessons that I gained from a coach of like an independent team one pretty early on for me said, I learned this from Holly Laurent. When you're on the sidelines, there's the 5-finger rule, and you need to be listening to the scene and fill up your fingers one at a time with 5 things you can call back, and physically do this on the side. Because if you do that, you might be able to connect a couple of them that'll like hang on in your mind. Like you probably won't remember all 5, but you remember some of them, and that'll give you some ammunition for later.
Yeah. It's like a muscle memory, which I should start doing, because I've said on the show before, I'll go into like a Herald situation. We'll be doing a Herald, and I'll go in.
We had a real Herald situation this week. I was at the store, full on Herald situation. The guy called back the manager.
Also, the fact that they just spell it like a guy's name is also just funny to me. But I remember, like, I'll go into, like, I'll be like a character in a second beat or whatever, and I'll have the character, and I'll have like a thing, whatever that they want to call back. And so we get to like the second beat of that scene, and someone's like brings me out, they like pull me out, and they like say something, and I literally go, how do I respond to this? What did I do in the first? Like, I don't even remember what I did as the character. And I'm like, I always try to like push it off on someone else. I'm like, wow, you're so complimentary. Like, because I just know I will never remember my character. So people come out, they're like, hey, look at that stack of plates over there. And I'm like, yeah, look at that stack of plates.
I'm like, okay, fine. I'll do the call.
Luckily my team will know. They're like, don't you think that that's just a giant mess because you don't like messes, remember? And I'm like, oh no, the plates. I like never remember. But it's also like, that's the beauty of improv, is we could be doing a second beat of a Herald, and I can guarantee you that audience doesn't remember what happened until we bring it back up. Because people go, oh, that's the guy, but they will not remember. They won't remember if we never bring him back. Like, they don't know how the Herald works. Like, we're not like, we're going to do a Herald, and this is exactly how it's going to work. We're going to be doing an organic opening, and then we're going to be doing 3 two-person scenes, and then we're going to do a group game. Like, no, we're not explaining it. We just say, this is a Herald, and people are like, cool.
Well, so to tie improv into the analogy of fantasy football, the prospect of fantasy football is very much like, there are people who take players and analyze individual ones so deeply that it just, when football is not being played, you can read an endless amount of information about statistics and like how good this guy is at avoiding turning pressure into an interception or into negative points. You're like, how would I be able to ever predict that when all I do is like click the name, start him this week? And I think when it comes to improvisational comedy, there is this notion that there is a perfect version of this thing. And the same thing exists in fantasy football. Like, there was a perfect lineup that I could have played. I left someone on the bench, and he scored a bunch of points, or I played someone who scored no points. And I screwed that up. I need to get that right by next week. And the same thing exists in improv, where you can do a show and you're like, objectively, I don't think a single scene went by where we weren't getting laughs, where we weren't having an awesome time, where we weren't like utilizing all of the concepts that we've learned over time, the tag run, the cut twos. We were doing creative transitional edits, characters that we hadn't, like wrapping things up. And then at the end of the show, you can meet with your coach or with each other, and someone will always find the thing where they're like, yeah, but, we didn't call back that like Prince character that we had, the little Prince who, remember in the second beat of the second scene, second beat, we just didn't call him back, and I was going to call him back. And everyone's like, nobody cares. Nobody cares that you didn't call that back.
Because they might not even remember.
Yeah. And I think ultimately the thing that we lose the forest for the trees because we're nitpicking the individual thing. And I think on the whole, if you don't make people drop to the ground laughing, then that should be the gauge. It shouldn't be this like, the longer we hang on to these minutia of you need to get the art of it right in order to succeed. No, you're not following the point of comedy. You need to follow, like, we should really be following, like, what is the audience telling us? Now let's get notes to adapt, how we can adapt more towards that. That's how I feel. I don't know if you, another thing I like connecting things to is like language. And over the course of human history, the human language has developed. Take, for example, English. We know that English, what started with Old English, where we get Beowulf, then Middle English, where we get the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer, and then we go into this sort of early modern with Shakespeare and thee, thou, that sort of thing, and that syncopation. All of a sudden we come into modern English, but even modern English is changing, where you get new words in the dictionary all the time, where like the word swag, all of a sudden it's in the dictionary, and the previous generation, you're like, I have no idea what that means. That's not a real word. Language changes, and so should our art form. So I think for me, I love long form improvisation, but I also wish that we stopped identifying the old way of doing things as the way that we need to hearken to, and instead say, what's our goal? It's to make people laugh. We need to follow that. We need to figure that one out, instead of figuring out what beat did we mess up the callback on. That's my personal opinion, and I'm willing to die on that hill. How do you feel?
Look, I think there was a lot in there.
I'm sorry.
There was a lot.
I gave you a big thesis. We jumped around.
I think it's great.
English, all of the English language.
Well, it's interesting because I tend to think of a lot of things in an aspect of music. As someone who was a board certified music therapist with a degree in music, I did this with Shakespeare specifically. I hated Shakespeare. I never wanted to do it. I never wanted to learn it.
Screw that guy.
I had a teacher who also, he's like kind of an a-hole. But what I remember is I went to a workshop, and I told the teacher I like music and stuff, and I was like, I hate Shakespeare. She goes, but think about it as music. Each stanza, each line has its own rhythm. And think of it as like with the way that the text is, there are long beats, there are short beats, and so when I thought of it in the world of music, I was like, oh, I hear the musicality in the words, and so it actually became a lot easier for me to speak it with the long or the short phrasing, because it actually sounded like a song. And so I was like, oh, interesting. I get that. Like the iambic pentameter actually has a rhythm to it. And so hearing it from music, it clicked. And that's kind of how improv was for me, with a lot of sports analogies for some reason, but also just like little tidbits from different teachers. I learned, like, when I've taken so many classes, in 8 weeks, I'm not going to process everything. It's just not going to happen. But there are certain things like that thing that Holly said about the bench versus the playing, like that thing I picked up on, and it had changed. I think it's because it clicked for me as like, oh, this is a thing. Also, like being told like it's okay to not jump out and start talking, because as someone with a Capricorn brain, I want to make sure my words are exactly right. So I'll keep talking until I get the phrase out that I want. You know what I mean? I've literally said, I'll remember, I will initiate, and I will go, you know what I mean? It's like, I can't think of the word, but you get the idea. The whole point is you get the idea. And I was like, because I can't think of the word. But one thing that I learned was, if I make a physical choice, sometimes I can relieve that pressure of myself to like have to say words. And I remember I auditioned for a really awesome improv show at Second City 3 times. I got called back 3 times, and finally made it during the year of pandemic. When I had one show, the world imploded. But I remember during my third time going to that audition, the third callback, sometimes I freak out at callbacks because pressure like stresses me out. And like knowing I'm being judged. But I went out, and we were doing 4, I think it was Foursquare we were doing, and the suggestion we had was like law or lawyer or judge or something like that. And I went, okay, and like in my mind I just went, I'm just gonna make a physical choice. I'm just gonna make a physical choice. So we did the scene, and I just laid on the stage, and I just started flailing my arms, and I just went, ugh. And my scene partner said, sir, I know it's been a long day, but there are many more clients we have to take care of before the end of the day or whatever. And I went, just 5 more minutes. I just need a break. And it was like this high status person playing a very low status character, all from me just going, I didn't say any words. And like it felt so wonderful because I was like, this worked. Like it worked. And it was me not even trying, which makes me want to ask this question. Are there any of those moments that you've had when you've been teaching improv, coaching improv, performing improv, learning improv, whatever it is, where you had like an aha moment like that, where it just clicked, something in improv clicked for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think everybody's really different. Right? And I think that that's what makes improv a particularly special thing. And I think that's why so many people are drawn to it. Because I think we go through phases actually where we are different people within our improvisational journey. And I can tell you, I've had phases where I know the same thing that you've just said is going to happen to me. I know I will step out, and whatever I say, be it the relationship I have to the audience or to my scene partner or just how I'm feeling that day, where I know whatever I'm about to say will not have the like reception that I want it to. So I will step out and I'll be like, I need to establish the physical presence of this first. And it gives you, it's like giving yourself that gift. I think for me currently, I've learned how to do things without that physical gift for the moment. But there are so many times when I'm doing things that like, I just will simply like, if I'm lost a little bit, I'm like, yeah, I've spent so long practicing object work. Of course, I like this is here's my knife. There we go, chop things. Like, just doing those simple actions, they are perfection. They also create the magic of the art form. One of the things that I do, I'm also part of Baby Wants Candy. I think they have Baby Wants Candy out in LA.
You're part of Baby Wants Candy?
I know, right? I'm sorry, I failed to mention that.
Have you performed in the LA version of it?
Not in LA. I've only been Chicago centric. Yeah.
Because I was like, I think Tara Copeland's in Baby Wants Candy, and Tara did my musical improv classes. I love Tara.
So this was what, when I was beginning my journey, my foray into improv in 2013 and beyond, one of the things I really wanted to do was make sure that I sort of tried my best to like master whatever art form, whatever versions of it I could.
Sure.
And I think from what we've been talking about, music improv is one of those things that like, there are times where whatever you're going to sing that day sucks, but then you can also dance in the background, and just people will like understanding the like magic trick hack of it. Like, doing a simple magic trick for someone where the trick, you might not be impressed, but the other person will be. Improv, we need to understand our relationship to improv as well. Just stepping up, doing the physical thing, people will be like, that's awesome. Like, I could never do that.
Also,
like,
on music crazy. Improv, I remember taking my first musical improv class I took. I actually took musical improv before I ever took an improv class. Because I was like, I'm a musician, I can totally do this. And I didn't realize like how improvised it was until I took a class, because I was like, they're gonna give me like some time to like come up with a little bit of words, like 3 minutes or so. But it was like, okay, here's your suggestion. Let's talk about it. Okay, go. And I was like, wait, I'm singing now? What's happening? I thought I was gonna have time to like write a piece.
I brought my pen and paper. Come on.
And then it's also funny because there are some people where I hear them like, and they'll rhyme, and I'm like, I am not rhyming. And it's great because I love Tara for that, because she's like, don't worry about rhyming, like just get the story out. And it's like, great. And inevitably, every time I'm like, I am not gonna rhyme, I just start rhyming, and I'm like, of course, this is where it sounds nice when I'm not thinking about it at all. But also, I've learned music improv is the same way. Like, the more specific I am, the easier it sometimes is to tell the story because I'm building the story. But I've also learned, like, I remember I had a musical improv. I don't remember anything, but I did remember this one musical improv that I did. I don't remember what the suggestion was. I think it was like Obama, and this was like in Obama era. And all I remember is my chorus was, thanks Obama, thanks Obama, thanks Obama, thanks Obama, thanks.
It works,
like that was what it.
Yeah.
And I did a musical. I wrote a musical every year for Fringe, and the one year I was like, I remember this song, and I put it in that show. I rewrote it as a written song, changed the verses obviously and everything because I had no idea what the rest of it was, but that was the chorus, and I was like, this is wild that I turned a musical improv song into a written song for a show. But I don't think I would have had the confidence to do
Now
that had I not
that's
had like
that's
improv
awesome.
experience.
No, that's awesome.
Uh,
I mean, I think also going back, hearkening to our original point here, improv translates. It becomes
yeah.
many other things. Saying that's essentially it's the second city process. But I think you don't necessarily need to say it's the second city way. Like improv is a tool to create other things. When you audition for a role, like, and they say like mess around with it or something, they're saying improvise. It's improv is the tool for you to know, like, I can come up with something on the spot. I can take the information I have, I can invent something, I can be different, I can do that. It's your little superpower. And I think that the magic of what you discovered is like improv gives you the thesis. You can find these different like wants, needs, and desires that you wouldn't, like when you just sit down and write it in like a notebook of like, what do I want? I want to do laundry. I want tacos. I don't know what I want.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden be like, I want to say thanks, Obama. I want to, like you wouldn't have just come up with that on your own. That's the
also,
beauty.
On that, it's like I always hesitate because I'm like, I don't want to have a bad improv scene. And generally, there's not really a bad improv scene unless you're like doing the no-nos or like no and negating and all that stuff. But I remember like even like as someone, I work as a tour guide at the Universal Studio Tour, and I give 4 or 5 tours a day, all with different audiences, all with like different things happening. And so, I'm going backward on a train. I'm giving all this history. We're stopped. Or like one time I remember that we came out of an attraction and people just started applauding. And I made like this joke of like, this earthquake is an 8.3 on the Richter scale, but that was an 8.3 on the Richter scale of applause. And it got this like big laugh. And then I was like, great, I'll do that next time. Did it next time, didn't land. And it was because it was in that moment. I improvised in that moment. And I think that's one of the beauties of improv is everything kind of lives in that moment. So you have that energy from that one little moment that you can relive, but it doesn't, it's almost like you had to have been there kind of situation, I think, with a lot of improv. And so that's what is also beautiful about it is if you don't have a great show, you know what? The second you leave, no one's going to remember what happened in that show. And that's totally fine. Maybe your coach, maybe your teammates for like 24 hours, but the audience is not going to remember. They're going to remember like, oh, remember when you played that guy who couldn't remember things? That was so funny. Like, that's all they're going to remember. They're not going to remember like if you did bad improv.
One of my friends, been around for a long time. I did a cruise contract with him. He like proposed this notion to me for the first time that I had ever heard it. I think this is 2017 when we were doing our contracts together. His name is Rob Grabowski. Fantastic guy, huge Chicago guy, huge comedy sports presence here, awesome guy. And he said like the difference for him between doing good improv and bad improv was kind of an epiphany moment for himself where he realized he's like, oh, I am funny. I'm a funny guy. And then he said, from then on out, every show he did, even if it was bad, he realized it was a good show. It was a funny show. I delivered and I did my job because I'm funny. And I think that happens for people. Like, I think it takes years. I think, I sometimes get frustrated when I talk to like young improvisers, but they're like, I've been doing this for 2 years. I should get more by now. And I just want to say like, stop it. Like a child is also 2 years old and just learning how to talk. Give yourself and their brain is amazing. Have you met babies? Their brain is incredible. It's better than our brains. So you've been doing something for 2 years. Nobody cares. All right. You need to reach the point in time where you eliminate the pressure of, I need to have gotten something. Stop it. What you need to get is the moment you realize, oh my gosh, I am good at this. I am funny. I do have the tools to make this work. And just let that be your moment. where you realize like I can do this, and then go from there. You know, you're not
I love
you're
that.
not somehow you're not better than anybody. You're not like special. You've just done this long enough that you're good at it now. You get it now. You have to have that moment though.
I love that. I love the analogy of being a 2-year-old. You're not going to know everything off the bat because you're 2, and that makes me feel better because as someone who improvises with people, I'm like, why are they so good? I'm like, oh, they've been doing it for a decade longer than I have. That's why they're better, because they've had more hours.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I'm gonna segue into something completely unrelated,
Okay.
just like Paul Blart segues. And this is my object work. It's absolute garbage, but that's okay because people that have good object work have been doing it for a very long time. So I will get better at it as I go. Or I won't, and that just makes it funnier. And that is, do you have any plugs, any pitches, anything you want to like promote? We'll link it down in the description.
Well, you know what? I have a really convenient at for all of my social media, as well as if you are somebody who likes fantasy football and you want to read what I have to say about it, you can look me up at Timmy Timmy underscore the underscore Metz, spelled Metz. Look me up. I do all sorts of TikTok videos that are very silly and often very unsuccessful. And I'm on Twitter with jokes all the time, Instagram. I'm Spotify with my comedy group that does a lot of comedy music called The Garden Boys. But you can find that information if you go to, I think, a number of my social media pages. And then you can also find me for fantasy, for football purposes under that. Also, the last thing I'd like to plug, I finally had my first film role, which was very exciting for me. Amazing. As an actor. Congrats. Thank you. Very small role, but it's a movie on Comedy Central called Hot Mess Holiday. Just go on to IMDb, give like a nice rating on it, and that actually will help. Even if you don't see the movie, I don't care. Just,
I mean, I love holiday movies and hot messes, so it sounds like it's right up my alley.
Yeah, right.
Well, Tim, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I have one more question for you, which is kind of the whole reason that the Improv Summit exists. I get a lot of people that ask me, as someone who, I've done so much improv, but I have, done a lot of programs, and people always come up to me and they're like, hey, Spencer, you take a lot of improv. Where should I take improv? In that voice always. And it's a hard question for me to answer because I feel like, one, I don't think I'm necessarily as seasoned as other performers, but two, there's just a lot that goes into choosing where to take improv and like what improv is right for you. So if someone came up to you and asked you that question, what's like one tip or one piece of advice you'd give to someone to help guide them on their improv journey?
Unfortunately, I have a lot of advice that I like to give to people. I think something that I would probably tell somebody asking me is understand your budget for exploring this art form. Because if this is something that you just want to dabble in, you honestly just go see shows. Hit up your friends who are performing and say, I want to see a show, but I want a comp ticket to it. And most of the time, they probably will be able to get you the comp ticket or a discount of some sort. In seeing those people perform, number one, builds a relationship with them. Number two, it lets you see the theater. And number three, it lets you know what's actually in the art form and what you can expect yourself to potentially do. There are many affordable ways to also pursue improv comedy. There are a number of new theater. The pandemic has been awful, but guess what? It sort of has leveled the playing field a little bit. I have a friend who's the founder of a theater called Stepping Stone Theater. And I believe they have a number of classes online related to something called the 10,000 Hours Workshop. And I don't know if those are online, but at least if you're in Chicago or nearby, you can look that up. Those are a couple bucks, literally a couple bucks. And you can learn from people. You can learn from people who've been around as long as a decade, like myself, or even longer for a couple bucks. I mean, that's insane. If you hired me to coach your team one-on-one, I would charge you a heinous amount. But if you get me in that program, you can pay $5. Sometimes you don't even need to pay anything. So I would look for local theaters that are putting up things like that. If you're new to it, it's your first foray, do that. Otherwise, I think just do some research on your budget. on a personal note, for the actual advice I give to people who know what path they want to take, I always tell them a quote by Socrates. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. The highest form of communication, the lowest form of communication is opinion. The highest form is empathy, because it takes seeing the world from someone else's point of view. I think that everything you do in improv needs to be from the point of view of saying, whatever I'm bringing to it matters, but it's not the most important thing. Especially when you're improvising scenes, when you're getting into it, make sure whoever you're doing it with feels important, and that you treat them that they're more important than you. You promise you, kindness is cheap. It will get you very far. That's my advice.
I love that. I also love that you quoted a fellow Greek, because as someone who's Greek, I always love to talk about being Greek on this show when I have a chance, and that actually led me right into that. Anyway. Listen, okay, I have to say this, but okay. Yeah. I once posted a TikTok because I was like, okay, y'all, I remember I was teaching an improv class to teens, and I went, look, I know exactly how everything works. I'm hip with the kids. You know, like when y'all go yeet, and they were like, what? And I was like, you know, yeet. They're like, it's like yeet, like sheesh. And I was like, oh. And so I posted on TikTok. I was like, look at what I did. I promise I'm not that old, but I'm also very old. And you know, I had a couple hundred views.
That's honestly, that's hilarious.
It was a moment of. I wish I had recorded it in the moment.
The problem is you tried too hard. You combined two things. Yeet and sheesh.
I was so confident in my choice too. I literally went, look, I can do this. I know I'm hip. Yeet. And then they all were like, Mr. Spencer, look, you're wrong. And I was like, sorry. Anyway, Tim, thanks so much for joining me here on the Improv Summit. I did say that was the last question I had for you, but as always on this show, I am a giant liar. So I actually have another question for you. And that question is, you know, we've been talking a lot about improv. You want to do some improv?
That'd be great. Let's do it.
Yes, and let's do it.
Hell yeah.
All right, we are going to do some improv. And Tim, as we've talked about, improv is very vast. There's a lot of different types of improv. We've got, you know, mostly short form and long form, but within those realms, there's so much. Long form has JTS Brown, deconstruction, some kind of flower, mono scene, Herald, as we talked about, a lot of different types of long form. Yeah, I mean, is it a lotus flower or a pretty flower? I think it's the shape of a lotus flower, but it's called a pretty flower.
It depends on how you view time, to be honest.
It's just a giant flower with 5 petals. That's really, it's a 5-petal flower. Let's just call it a poinsettia. Or as some people call it, a poinsettia. But because it's a IA, so you know, I'm from the South. I've heard it both ways. Listen, but I really want to play with the idea of not being specific at all, because there's all these different specific types of forms. But let's just get a suggestion for this that is not specific at all and see what we can come up with based on this suggestion. So I'm going to put a very not specific suggestion in the chat, and we're going to see if we can come up with a scene based on that suggestion. So here it comes into the chat. So I'll just go ahead and read that out loud.
My gosh. Okay, the suggestion is aisle.
Aisle, I''LL.
Yes, not to be confused with the land mass in the middle of a body of water.
This is the contraction of I will. Or in the South, we like to call it ow, ow.
Ow.
Ow. Great. So that's our suggestion. Who would you like to initiate this scene?
Why don't you initiate this scene?
Great. All right, let's do it.
I like it.
Thank you. Ow. Well, I'll be honest. This aquarium is quite up to my standards. This is very clean. This is very clean, Frank.
I have to agree. I did spend a few hours cleaning it, and I'll be honest with you. I was phoning it in when I cleaned this up, and it looks amazing. It looks it looks shinier than a fresh pair of Armor All, or set of Armor All, or coat of Armor All. Armor all.
I'll be honest with you, Frank. I
Yeah.
have never heard anyone call it a coat of armor all, but I see what you mean. It's very fresh. It's very shiny, and honestly, like I feel like I can clean my teeth with it if I'm being completely honest.
I'll be honest with you. If you did clean your teeth with it, I'd be okay with that.
I'll be honest, me too.
Okay, I'll be honest. If you did it with the seahorse garden, I would be very impressed.
I'll be honest, that was actually where I was thinking about heading because, you know, the bristles of the seahorse actually kind of resembles the texture of the toothbrush.
Oh, please do it. Please do it. Would you please? I'll be your friend forever if you would just clean your sweet white pearls with a fresh little coral reef baked seahorse.
I'll be honest, I've always wanted to be your friend for life, and when you said pearl, it honestly made me think of the clams. You know, inside the clam, there's a pearl. Maybe I should clean my pearly whites with a pearl. You know what I mean?
I'll be there to hold your hand the whole way. If you do that, then we'll pivot. I'll clean my teeth in the seahorse garden, and you'll take the clam.
I'll be honest. I would love to take your hand. And in fact, I would like to suggest that maybe I'll brush your teeth, you brush mine.
I'll one further you. I would love if we brushed each other's teeth at the same exact time, and both listened to I guess a series of Meghan Trainor songs, sort of an in the Meghan. That's beside the point.
I'll be honest. It is all about that bass.
All about that bass.
And if we turn the speaker up, I mean, we can really pump out that bass for sure.
Yeah. Oh, I missed a smudge in this whale shark aquarium. That's embarrassing. I'll admit I'm embarrassed. I missed that.
I'll be honest. I'd be embarrassed too.
I'll tell you something if you'll tell me something.
I will tell you something if you'll tell me something.
I brought your toothbrush with me.
I'll be honest, I brought your toothbrush with me.
Okay. I'll go cue the Meghan Trainor songs.
Okay. Because you know it's all about that bass.
All about that bass.
No treble. Scene. What an interesting pair of characters.
Wow. Very nice. Clearly alone in an aquarium.
Clearly. I brought your toothbrush. I brought yours. Like, what?
Your toothbrush to this abandoned aquarium.
It was also funny because I think I started laughing because you were like, I want to tell you something. And then you're like, if you take the coral and then you use the sea urchin and then the seahorse with the shark tooth, I was like, what is happening?
I'll tell you something. I'm tired.
No, it was just
I'm a tired boy.
I thought it was hilarious because the funniest thing is we don't have any idea who these two characters are to each other, and that makes it even better. Like we can assume a lot, but we don't know.
I mean, I think this is one of those scenes that you could see a callback of them, like realizing that they're roommates, like being like you could see a second beat of this where they're like extremely intimate and being like, all right, well, I'm gonna go to work. I'm gonna go move to a different apartment because my girlfriend's over there. I'm like, oh, well, I've enjoyed being your roommate, and then like brushing each other's teeth. So like that little bit feels very like lift it, put it in something else, or like the board meeting with the boss that's like hugging him or whatever.
Yeah, map it out. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Or it could even be like, I'll sleep in your bed if you sleep in my bed.
Yeah, right.
Like switching around things. Thanks everybody so much for coming to the Improv Summit. As always, I'm your host, Spencer. That's Tim. See you next time. Bye.